of my journey through the MSc. I started this in September 2007. I went over to find out a little bit about e-learning and how to implement it, and maybe go about doing a small little project, and that's exactly what the course seemed to be about. So I signed up for it, and I'm going to sort of illustrate my journey by showing you a few of the publications, books, etc. that I've looked at along the way. The first one I'll start with, because the first ones we looked at was this JISC e-learning models desk study, and there's a quote in this that stands out, that there are no e-learning models per se, only e-enhancements of existing models of learning, and that kind of sums up the e-learning. For me, it's really about learning, and I've taken that approach during the MSc, and in fact in my project I really looked at learning in general, not just at e-learning on its own. One of the other initial modules we looked at was in authoring and instructional design, so these books were useful for them. To be honest, I actually bought these after I did those modules. I probably would approach those modules a bit differently second time around, but in other words, my approach to sort of designing learning objects is now different than it was at that point. I think I just lacked sort of an awareness of the different learning objects that are available, different designs and different styles. Maybe didn't have the creativity of my own to just kind of go there myself. I needed to see some good examples, and I just hadn't seen any at that stage. This book by Clark and Meyer is quite good because it gives you a lot of principles that you can include when designing learning objects. I've learned how to use HTML and CSS, and I've learned how to use a little bit of PHP. And again, although I didn't do this when I was doing my instructional design module, I wrote the CSS myself and the HTML and all that stuff. I would now take a different approach. I copy a very nicely designed web template designed by someone else for free, or a free CSS template. I chop it up, call the banner, the sidebar, the footer with PHP, and then I just add the content into the different pages as required. So the e-learning portfolio that you're looking at on the website is an example of that. The software I've learned, apart from the software packages, I suppose, the HTML, etc., they're languages, but the software packages I've used, Xerte and Camtasia stand to mind. Xerte and Camtasia are both ways of creating learning objects, sort of a series of screens with next and previous on them. Xerte is free, Camtasia isn't. Captivate is another one, but that also costs money. So I've spent a lot of time working on those, and I've also spent a lot of time messing around with images and videos. I'm not a graphic designer. I wish I was, and I wish I had all the software and all the tools needed to do all those things, but I limp along using Microsoft Paint and PowerPoint, and realise how much better it could be if I was a learning technologist. So I try to focus on the pedagogical aspects of things where I can. Speaking of which, as part of my project, I looked at how to improve the student experience in a PBL module by supporting it with them with some pre-laboratory e-learning resources. However, this made me think about the module in general. I was evaluating their asking them for feedback, and obviously it led to other things apart from just the specific things I was looking at. And I'm always very aware of the whole group work and always challenged trying to facilitate it. So this MSc made me also read books like this one on problem-based learning. And this one stands to mind because Tiberius makes a point in here that students aren't actually able to, many students just don't have the skills to work in groups, full stop, and they need to develop those, and that I've become more aware of that issue now, and plan next year to try and apply other interventions just to improve group work and try and make the groups work a bit better. Maggie Savin-Baden in this book on problem-based learning makes a similar point. The difficulty students find in transitioning from a teacher-centered approach to a student-centered approach, it takes time, it takes a lot of heartache, the students' identities need to change. Many of them actually just withdraw from the whole PBL process. They find it crazy, they want answers, the teacher won't give them to them. And all of this, as she says, is actually not that well reported in the literature. There are loads of papers where people talk about, we changed this module to PBL and it was a great success. And they are, but there's also always these hidden challenges in terms of getting the students to come along. The data I gathered through questionnaire and focus group interviews, some of it was quantitative. However, I had very few samples, therefore I discovered that my sample size was just so small that I couldn't actually draw any statistical significance to what I was doing. I couldn't distinguish between chance and intervention, but I did learn about how to do a chi-squared test and all that type of stuff. My data was, a lot of it was qualitative. At a focus group interview, I had some reflective questions in the questionnaire. So this book and a couple of others I read on analysing qualitative data helped me along. Funny thing is, the starts of these books are very much like the JISC e-learning models desk study. The start of the PBL books are very much like the e-learning models desk study. So it's really, the whole educational psychology has popped up again and again and again, and I've read it from different aspects so much over the last 2 years that I feel I'm starting to understand it. And I've also had to explain my sort of partially formed ideas to others, and that has helped me an awful lot. So I've been reflecting all the way along. I've been trying to reflect about how I learn and on what I've learned, and as a result of that, I've been become more involved in engineering education research. Last week I was in the UK at the Engineering Subject Centre that hosts this particular journal. They had a workshop on looking at ways of exploring some international cooperation into engineering education research, and I was at a similar event organised through CEFI, the European network, in Aalborg in February, and I would not have been able to discuss as much and to talk as confidently as much if I had not read all these different books that I've just showed you, because they really have started to me on a journey of becoming aware of the theory behind education and the theory behind, for example, problem-based learning, and how you can make it work better. And I'm thinking of doing a PhD in engineering education research next year. So I think that's a good indication of my experience on this MSc. Thanks.